One. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome to 2022. And it's January 10th, which means it is now time to call today's work session to order. Thank you to everyone who's joining tonight to be a part of the meeting. The next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. But I did, once we get into the discussion, just want to call out all of the items didn't have time limits next to them. So just wanted to point that out and we can get into that in discussion. But is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Moved by, was that Councilmember Rout? Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Brown. And as I mentioned, there weren't time limits next to everything. So I wanted to see if the council would be amenable to the following adjustments for the Bostwick House presentation. We need a little time there. So 20 minutes. And then under old business, 5 minutes per item. Dropping down to new business, same thing, 5 minutes per item, just to keep it easy. And then Mr. McGrory had attached to our packets a couple of letters from AWS, but they were not listed on the agenda. So wanted to find out, Mr. McGrory, were you planning to put AWS on? Okay, so more FYI, okay. And then, so with that, I think that covers all of the items. Is there a motion? I'm sorry, any further adjustments or edits to the agenda? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, let it be known by the saying of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you so much. The next item on the agenda for tonight is the approval of the work session minutes from December 13th. Is there a motion to approve?
So
I think that was Councilmember Brown. There was two speaking at one time, but the box was highlighted around. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember McBride. Any discussion or edits to the work session minutes? All right, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, let it be known by the saying of aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you so much. The next item I'm very excited to move on to is under appearances. The Bostwick House is a huge asset in the community, and we'll have a brief presentation tonight from Allie O'Neill from the Neighborhood Design Center. But Mr. Parker, did you want to introduce Allie or let her introduce you? How do you want to handle that?
I'll be glad to introduce Allie. Allie's with the Neighborhood Design Center, and Neighborhood Design Center, Allie will give you more details, a nonprofit that has been helping not only us with Bostwick, but they are, Allie and the Neighborhood Design Center has been a very valuable nonprofit partner to help a lot of community groups in the area of community development, design issues, landscaping issues, and so we're proud and very excited to have worked with Allie looking at Bostwick and trying to figure out what the vision for Bostwick should be. So with that, I'll turn it over to Allie.
And if I may, just so everyone understands who Mr. Parker is, he is the secretary for Amen Trust, who is a huge town partner and former chairman of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, huge supporter of Prince George's County and Bladensburg in particular. So we have quite a titan on the line here. So Mr. Parker, thank you for being here, and over to you, Allie.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you all. It's absolutely wonderful to be here with you this evening. I'm just going to run through a few slides. Was I successful in sharing my screen? Yes? Yeah. Okay, yes. Excellent. Right. Well, so as Mr. Parker said, the Neighborhood Design Center was brought in as a partner with the Amen Trust to really begin to understand how we could come together around a vision for the future of the Bostwick House and grounds. It is an absolute asset in town and has an opportunity to just really be leveraged as a gem for Bladensburg. And so just as Mr. Parker said, the Neighborhood Design Center, we are a nonprofit. We work across Prince George's County and have been honored to work in Bladensburg with other partners around town for more than 27 years. We started in Baltimore in 1968, and it is our work to bring professional volunteers as well as our talented staff members to projects that communities invite us into and are in support of larger neighborhood benefit. What we really set out to understand is that the clock is ticking and we have an amazing asset in the town of Bladensburg. And we know something needs to happen. And so we opened the report with our statement of need and did just want to reiterate that the town has been good stewards of the Bostwick House and has kept it going, and it has been through the support of other partners who you all have brought to it that have gotten us to today. And we do know it will require additional investment in order to get the Bostwick House and grounds up to the usable asset that we believe it could be. And so NDC undertook a long process with a group of diverse stakeholders, really to start to understand what was both possible and appropriate at the Bostwick House. And we held a series of meetings over the course of 2021. Actually, the project started in 2019 and 2020, but we were stymied by the events of early 2020. We did get back together and we're able to meet weekly. We had stakeholders who were brought in from local nonprofits, community leaders, members of the Amen Trust, as well as involved and engaged citizens. We had our library system, other government agencies represented as well. And we went through a series of wonderful meetings and were able to distill down some extremely important principles to guide the design for the future of Bostwick. Without reading them exactly aloud to you all, I do just want to highlight, that this project is seen as really a positive catalyst for the town, rooted in Bladensburg, in its values, in its unique location on the river, in its history, and that this is meant to be a community asset, really to better the lives of the community in the Bladensburg area. We know that there are significant histories here and that storytelling is going to be a way to engage residents of all ages and of all backgrounds, and to really bring them into stories that are so important locally and nationally. But I will say that the process did not take us where we wanted, where we thought we were going to go. We thought the finish line was going to be a vision, a series of options for what could happen next. And we did a lot of work. We reached really great points. You saw it outlined in the report. And what we know is it's going to take a little bit more to get us across that finish line. And with that, some takeaways and next steps. This steering committee we've engaged is made up of incredibly talented and committed individuals. And there's absolutely space for more as well. But what we believe is that this talented group who have verbally expressed interest in continuing will be most effective as they continue to work together in smaller working groups focused on fundraising, partnerships, other really important aspects of the project. Also, the architecture and engineering of the house itself and outbuildings. But that the working group and project-specific MOUs are a great way to continue to engage and honor the work done by this group. Additionally, we know how much, there's so much history, there's been so much work done by the town and by town staff over the course of years of ownership of Bostwick, and it's going to take a little bit more to get us to move the project forward. And a dedicated consultant who's able to really kind of manage and shepherd all of these many moving pieces would be an incredibly beneficial addition to the project team. And then we also believe that we still need to continue to focus the vision. And the vision's really going to drive almost everything else that follows. And so while things can start on different parts of the project, it feels as though this is a very important next step. NDC is happy to support in partnership of the town in continuing this visioning work, if that's appropriate. I wanted to be brief. I know you all have the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. McNeil. Mr. Parker, did you want to add any summary remarks regarding the presentation or just the process of the stakeholder group?
What I'd really like to do then, is go into the Amen Trust and then get some sense about how we move along to take the report to something that's implementable. So if you don't mind if I go in that direction.
So before we do that, let me just pause for questions and then we'll move right on. So from the staff or council members, are there any questions for Ms. O'Neill regarding the presentation? Okay, all right, back over to you, Mr. Parker.
Oh, okay. So I'm really glad to be part of this and having the opportunity to speak to the council. Just for those who may or may not know about the Amen Trust was formed as a 501c3 back in 1984, and its purpose is to preserve historic buildings, to promote revitalization in and around the town of Bladensburg. And in doing that over the number of years, we've actually worked on the preservation of 4 National Register properties: the George Washington House, the Magruder House, the Market Master's House, and the Amen Trust was responsible for both the idea, the development, and the execution of the War of 1812 Memorial Monument, which its objective is not only to save historic properties in this area and in the town of Bladensburg, but also to figure out a way to make them sustainable for the future. How do you create something that puts it into what's termed in historic preservation an adaptive reuse that allows for those buildings to be functioning, to find a way for revenues to come into those properties to maintain them for a longer period of time. So, for example, George Washington House, we restored that and then sold it to the Anacostia Watershed Society. The Market Master's House, we owned and also bought a small piece of adjacent land, but that's now a private home that's being restored. All these historic structures have easements on them, so they are required to be maintained according to the standards of the State Maryland Historical Trust. We have always felt that the Bostwick House was really the prime jewel of the historic structures within the town of Bladensburg. But we also knew there were significant issues associated with that, and that had to do with how do you restore a building of that size and scale? What should it be used for? How does it benefit the entire Bladensburg community? But it also has assets not only for the state, but also for the whole United States when it comes to history and its importance, both architecturally, both for historical place within the evolution of our country. And that story, as we all know, needs to be much broader than who were the famous people that lived there. But how did those people and how did the situations on those properties affect a larger group of folks? How did it affect people of color? How did it affect the evolution of Bladensburg through its long history since the 1700s? Those stories are more than just the bricks and mortar and the preservation of the building. And it becomes important for us as we figure out what to do with Boswick, that the entire community becomes the owner of that story, the owner, and feel like it is they have a stake in it also. That they have a stake not only in the restoration of the building and the preservation of the building, but they have a stake in what the current history is and where does it go into the future and how it affects them. That's not an easy thing to do in a very diverse community like Bladensburg. But that's one of the tasks that I think came out of our attempt to figure out what the vision and also the difficulty that Ali spoke about, the difficulty in figuring out what should it be. House museums now are archaic. You don't just build or restore a building for a house museum. But there are deep stories in all these particular properties. The question is, how do you get there? Back in 2016, the Amen Trust went into a memorandum of understanding with the town of Bladensburg to try to organize a process to move Boswick along. The town has done over the years a yeoman's job in trying to stabilize the building, to try to keep it at a certain level of deterioration. But it's very difficult because those smaller projects stabilize it, but it doesn't take it to where it really needs to go and really what it can be for the town. So during that MOU and creating that MOU, we wanted to create a process that we could work with the town, we could work with other stakeholders who are interested in Boswick, and there are many. You have the University of Maryland, which has been up there for a number of years. You have the Anacostia Watershed Society that uses the property. You have Prince George's Heritage. You have people around the state who are interested in the War of 1812 and all the environments around it. So there were a number of groups that have an interest, but there had to be a focus and there had to be a starting point. And the starting point was, how then do you start to restore the building to move it to a point where it can start to shine? And there's some particular tasks that need to happen. For example, you need to figure out what all the systems are, what's the condition of all the systems, what things in a historic building are required to be saved because of historic easements, what makes sense for the kind of infrastructure, the heating, the air, the bathrooms, all that kind of stuff needs to be figured out and to be worked on, but it needs to be worked on in the context of a very important historic building. The Amen Trust wanted to help the town move that along. And since 2016, we have helped the town with other groups to raise about almost $250,000, both from private donations, from the county, from the state. The town has put in additional money. Amen has put in some money to move this along, but it became kind of obvious that smaller projects were not going to move the needle to where we want it to be. We really had to grab hold of Boswick and really say, this is going to take millions of dollars. This is, and the investment of millions of dollars is not just to save the bricks and mortar. The investment of millions of dollars in Boswick is for the town and the community of Bladensburg, and embracing what that history means, and then how do you use that history to take the town to where it wants to be in the future. It's not the past, it's moving towards the future. So in all honesty, we've spent a fair amount of money and a number of years on these small projects. And we have to now take some big steps forward and some serious investment to move the Boswick along. So and one of the things that came out of our stakeholder meeting is that the basic structure, the beginning of the restoration of Boswick, is one of the first steps that you have to take. And no matter what it's going to be, you've got to deal with those critical structures within that building. You've got to hire the experts to figure out what's there, what's not there, what has to be improved, what's the steps for doing that. You've got a ton of government regulations that are and eyes that look at how you restore a historic building. All of that has to be taken into account. But most of all, you've got to have a laser beam on getting it done. I think over the life of that the town has had it, that you've done a lot, but it's kind of a hit and miss. As the problem comes up, you solve the problem, but that's not getting us, the town, and all those who really want to engage in this, to a point where Boswick is that shining light on the hill. And the other issues that I mentioned are just as important. They have to go along with this at the same time. There's a lot of money to be raised. That's going to take a pointed effort. There's got to be some community engagement in determining what that real vision is going to be. People have to have and need to have ownership in that building. There are programs that relate to both the fundraising, there are programs that you can organize at Boswick that relates to how people feel about the property and the building and what happens on the building. There are stories that need to be developed and presented in a way that people understand about Boswick's place in Bladensburg, and Bladensburg place in Prince George's County. Tremendous amount of effort, but we've got to have a group that says, we're going to take this on. We're going to embrace all the groups that have to be part of this, but we're going to take responsibility to make some of this happen. What the Amen Trust has put on the table after this stakeholder set of meetings and the report is, we'd like to refresh that memorandum of understanding, and based upon what has happened now, what we think makes sense, and to move along the historic restoration, the analysis of what needs to be done in the building, no matter what happens to the building, to help raise that money and to be the point, working with the town to move that along, to take on the responsibility. What Amen Trust has, we have a board of about 12 people. Those 12 people, some of them are here online with us. John Sauer, Diane Griffin now is on our board. Joe Rodriguez, who has a shopping center, he's now on our board. Jim Foster, who used to be at the Anacostia Watershed, has taken on the yeoman task of refocusing our expertise and moving the Amen Trust along in a that would allow it to take on a task like this. We have people we have attorneys, we have historians, these are the folks on our board. You know, I have a very large experience both in historic preservation and in project management and planning, that kind of thing. We have people who are deeply committed to not only Boswick, but deeply committed to the town of Bladensburg. But we all have to do it together. Can't be, we aren't asking that you just give it to us and we just go off and do our thing. We bring you back and restore building. It's not going to happen that way. It is
And
not.
Mr. Parker, sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to just bring the council in to give them an opportunity to ask any questions because our time is fleeting. That's okay. I know you're passionate about it. We love the Bostwick House, and we could go on and on. Councilmember Brown wanted to get your question, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Hi, Mr. Samuel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That was some good information and bringing us up to what has been done. I've been living in Bladensburg for over 25 years, and the Bostwick House. I mean, we seem to keep talking about the same thing, and we know what needs to be done, and there have been, as you said, some improvements in little buckets, here and there, and so and we definitely appreciate the collaboration with Amen Trust as well. But in moving the needle forward, it's like, okay, we know what needs to be done. So what is that level of effort that it's going to take to say, hey, here's some of the first steps, some of the priorities. As you were talking about the structure, the foundation, those types of things, to even get it in a condition where people can even step through the front door. Because I remember one time, it was a long time ago, maybe 2012. And so there was a meeting there with one of the organizations inside the building, and it was, thinking about it being stable and those types of things. So I don't want to be too lengthy, but is it something where it's like, okay, well, prioritize and say, this is what needs to be done. Here is the big picture. We need $5 million, $2 million, whatever it is for this restorative project, as they have theirs in Riverdale, Oxon Hill Manor, and so forth. So I'm thinking, just looking at that and say, hey, this is, if we can come up with that number, if it's 1.5 million, 2 million, and we have that goal to say this will at least get us in the door, structural, and those types of things. I'm just saying, how do we move the needle? How do we get past where we're just, kind of, I don't know, stuck?
Surprisingly, we have a lot of information, but it doesn't necessarily mean the right information to move along. For example, we don't have the right information to say what should be fixed in that house first, and what's the level of.
And I get that, not to cut you off, but I get that. But how do we get that information? So how, the next steps to get it? Because we know what we don't have.
Let me just jump in, because we are running long on this. And, if we need to have a part 2, I think for next month's work session, happy to invite you all back just for the sake of time. But I think what I heard from Mr. Parker is to kick things off so that we don't have no movement, is to consider moving forward with renewing our MOU with Amen Trust, because they are a trusted partner. This would be their 4th historical project with the town of Bladensburg, and they have the expertise in those areas that were outlined: fundraising, preservation, and the rest. And I think we don't want to have this just sitting. And so that to me is a first step, because frankly, internally, we don't have a staff person who's a historical preservation expert who can do this. So we need help. We need a partner, and we don't want to throw this on staff members who are already being stretched. So with that in mind, and you all jump in and tell me if I'm wrong, I think where things landed is for us to begin looking at the MOU as a council and as staff to determine if this suits the services, the help, the expertise that we think we need from Amen Trust to move forward. And so between now and the February meeting, if we could do some back and forth with really fine tuning this to make this agreement appropriate for where we're trying to go, I think that is our first next step. And so I just want to, put that out there so we know we have clear direction how to keep moving this forward, so that it doesn't sit and it's 8 years later and we're still trying to, go back to square one. So I want to just changing my screen boxes here, but just that my question is directed to the council members. If you all feel that that's appropriate action, and as the last comment, I'll let Councilmember Rout go, and we'll move on. Councilmember Rout.
Thank you, Mayor James. I just have a quick question. I don't know who it's directed to, but is there like a work plan or a strategic plan that we have as it relates to the Bostwick House? Has that ever been done? Because I do recall when I joined the council 2 years ago, I took a tour. Of course, it was COVID and it was, COVID. So I know it was like dead water, and because of time, but I wanted to specifically understand the goals and where we are as it relates to tracking. Thank you.
And it's a great question, Councilmember Rout, and it did come up on a recent planning call. And that's the idea that we get support from a partner to help us not just identify the strategic plan moving forward, but that they help us with the facilitation with the community, gathering input, because this is the community's property. This is the community's asset. And so we need a partner, because again, we can't expect our staff to drive this forward, but we need the right partner who can help with the visioning, the strategy, the community engagement. And so this is really the first step in helping us get there, because I could be wrong, but I haven't seen a strategic plan for it. And these are the kinds of things we want to lay out the vision with not just the council, but our community members. So that's why I'm asking if you all are amenable to just saying, let's start with the MOU to formalize our working relations so we can begin moving down the path and moving this forward, because it is a legislative priority. And as was stated before, this project has been worked on in small bites, but we are at the point where we can't afford to do that anymore. We need a huge capital investment in this facility, and we need to start moving it forward. So with that, Mr. Parker and Ms. McNeil, I want to thank you both for joining us. Any final comments before we move to the next item?
No.
Okay, thank you both so very much.
All right.
And I'm sorry, Mr. McGrory, your hand was raised. I apologize. I was scrolling and.
No, Mayor, thank you. I put it back down, but I think you've encapsulated the tasks ahead of us very well, as have our partners. I was simply going to throw in, I very much appreciate, just from the staff perspective, having been back in town employee now for 6 months, there's a couple great points that were raised in this, and that is the staff bandwidth. I have a particular passion for Bostwick House, as have many former staff and current staff. The reality is we have other things in our scope of work, and I fully support the notion that we have an outside partner and project manager to help lead the charge on this. Just in the past 2 years, we've seen 3 people in the town clerk's role, which had been a lead position on this. The prior town clerk had been here for 20 years and did a great job managing these grants and working on Bostwick, and 4 people in the town administrator's role. So I think the continuity of having a project partner would be outstanding. And I think the parallel tracks of updating the MOU, revising that in partnership with Amen Trust, and building on the great work that we've done over many years. And then separate from that, doing some visioning internally and longer term looking at the adaptive reuse of the property, separate from that scoping, the structural assessment of the physical structure and then the archaeological assessment. So I think staff is fully in agreement with what's been outlined as our homework for the next month. Thank you.
Great, thank you all again. So with that, we will proceed with the next item on the agenda. But again, want to thank all of the representatives from Amen Trust, Mr. Foster, I saw on here, as well as Mr. Sauer. Thank you both for joining as well. No, we didn't have time to hear from you, but we appreciate your time. And of course, Ms. O'Neill and Mr. Parker, thank you both.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We'll talk soon.
All right, sounds
Bye now.
great. So we'll move forward with old business. Just want to notify the public. We have set the date for the next Port Towns quarterly meeting. That will be January 31st at 6 p.m. Thank you, Mr. McGroy, for working with our partners to get that on the schedule. If we have any agenda items, please shoot those over to Mr. McGroy. He'll work with the other towns managers and formulate the agenda so they can circulate that to everyone. So for the sake of time, we don't have to have discussion on it. Let's just, if you all don't mind, just send our agenda items to Mr. McGrory. Does that sound good? Thumbs up. Everybody go with that? Okay, thank you. The next item is critically important. And it's the State of Maryland Bond Bill recommendation for a town hall replacement. And so if I may just back up, and speaking with our state senator over the summer, he recommended that the town leverage the support we have in him by really putting forth this legislative session, a project that is town specific and one that is more broad. And so the town specific project we talked about was a new town hall facility and police department. The other project, which is a little broader, is the Bostwick House and getting his support with getting funding from the state for that. And so going back to the town hall specifically, the idea is really just to be fully transparent. The facility is over 50 years old. It is falling apart. Our staff are doing the best that they can to keep it maintained, but we're trying to grow, and it's just increasingly difficult to do that in such an outdated building. There's issues, I know, with the storm last week, the gutter on one side of the building came down, that sometimes the heavy rains result in flooding, which impacts staff trying to work from the inside of the building. So there's just, there's only so much patching that we can do. So before I turn it over to the council for questions, Mr. McGrory, did you want to add any further commentary about the bond bill recommendation or process? And then I want to open it up to the council for questions and comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very briefly, and this is sort of building on what was discussed in your packets at last month's meeting, was extensive documentation about the bond bill process and the submittal process. So really, this was just building on that to say the deadline is approaching. The sooner the better for submitting this. If the town is to submit a bond bill this year, we want the encouragement, support of the council, but in whatever form, to move forward with this priority, which is clearly the staff's big priority for the replacement or reconstruction of the town hall. So the reason to put it on the agenda was, again, building on that presentation last month from Mr. Perez, that we'd like to start working on this. And this really puts the staff at a sprint to get harder numbers together and to make a credible effort on doing a bond bill submittal. We do have some internal experience and the support of Mr. Perez, as well as from the legislature on this. So I think we have a decent prospect. We don't have, we're not super far along at all with architectural renderings or anything of what might come forward. But I think you've got to start somewhere. And so with putting this gun to our head, we're hopeful to move this forward as briskly as possible this legislative session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGrory, but I don't thank you for the gun to the head analogy. That's pretty graphic, but we get it. Sprinting, shall we say. Council Member Rout, want to bring you in. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Mayor James. So my question is, so even though I missed last meeting, I was able to look at the recording, so I'm brought up to speed. What is needed from the council? I'm not too clear. Is it a number that we're willing to commit to get the bond bill started? Is it an architect to work with us on determining best spaces, design-wise, what we are envisioning? I know Mayor James and I collaborated on a letter. So the council definitely wants to move this project forward. I'm just not too clear as it what the ask is of the council, because this is something definitely we need, because we're bricks falling off of the building. We want to grow more to bring more staff in. We can't grow because we don't have anywhere to put our staff. So we understand the need, we get it, but I just don't understand what the ask is. Thank you.
And so really the ask is to get agreement from the council for moving forward with a bond bill. Previously, we approved our legislative priorities, and this is clearly on there. So the council just needs to determine if we want to proceed with this method to get funding for the bond bill. And this would be separate from the governor's capital budget request that we submitted the letter for. So the one question I have, Mr. McGrory, though, is because the process, let me stop and go back to your question also, Councilmember Rout, what is needed in terms of the process? So the first thing would be is we need to get with our bond bill sponsor, which in this case would be Senator Augustine's office, to request that they submit the form. They opened up the portal December 1st. And so we have some weeks that we can submit this by. I'm trying to see. Yeah, so we have to get that in within, it has to be introduced by the 27th day in the Senate and by the 31st day in the House. And bear in mind, the legislative session is getting ready to start up on the 14th, I believe it is. Councilmember, the 12th. Okay, so Wednesday. So the clock will start ticking at that point. So I want to just
lip reading now.
Yep. Thank you. So I'm thinking, because it is a legislative, but also financial, do we need to add this under financial business for the council meeting, Mr. McGrory?
So, yeah, Mayor, I would say a couple things. One, it's on the agenda to just sort of reiterate the process staff intends to pursue. The council can certainly validate that with a vote in whatever form that takes. But the main reason to put this on the agenda was to avoid the prospect of a bond bill being submitted by our senator based on the work staff is doing that one or more council members may be aware of from prior conversations, but that the whole council and the public is not aware of. And then there's an aha moment when you see the bills filed and see the number on the legislative calendar and say, what the heck, I didn't know about this. So really, the conversation and the mandate from the council, I believe, is clear. And informally, staff can certainly work to push this forward and work with our senator and delegates on that. But were the council to say, yes, let's all vote in the affirmative to move forward with the bond bill, that would be perfectly fine to add that into the mix. But I think we're all aware of the task ahead of us, and we just wanted to, and it gives us some cover to devote a significant amount of staff time, which this will entail in the back and forth with the legislature, just to get the bill submitted and do the some of the scoping work.
So definitely we'll call for the vote. Thank you for that, Mr. McGrory. So we'll definitely call for the vote in the council meeting just to have it on the record and show consistency with the legislative priorities and all the work that's been done so far. Just want to flag for you, though, one important piece that we'll need staff to start working on, because time goes so quickly, is the fact sheet submission. So instead of written testimony, we're advised to submit a fact sheet about the project. And so just to start thinking about the content of that and how to really build it out with the case for why this is so greatly needed is important. Councilmember Brown, I see your hand.
I'm just real quick, Mr. Tony Perez, he is working with us on this as well continuously. Is that correct? As a lobbyist?
That is correct. Yes. We did engage Mr. Perez on a temporary basis to sort of get us out of the blocks on prioritizing some of these legislative matters. We haven't turned those discussions to a longer term engagement with him. but he is aware, the purpose of that was to get us started in the legislative session, and we do intend to continue that work. So
Yeah, because
yes,
he's taking on the bond bill in terms of helping us to make sure that we're meeting the deadline and meeting what they need, what our senators and delegates need at during this session, because session starts on the 12th. So just want to make sure that she's continuously engaged on helping us at least meet the deadlines for our submissions and everything, so that we don't miss that window of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Brown, for that. Any other comments or questions on the bond bill process? Councilmember Rout?
Yes, so piggybacking off of Councilmember Brown, would this be eligible to be covered under ARPA? For the consultant fee, I'm sorry, for the consultant, can the consultant be covered under ARPA? Because it is a capital outlay and it's a consultant. Just a question, or it's something, maybe it's a rhetorical question, because we may have to do some investigative work to see, but I do think that it is an allowable cost because I'm familiar with the Federal Register. So just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Councilmember Rout. Mr. McGray, do you mind researching that and coming back to let us know if you don't have a response right now? I'm not sure if you know or not.
No, I don't have a definitive answer off the top of my head, but I would guess, it's a matter of there's 7 buckets eligible for ARPA funding, and it's a matter of trying to identify specific costs that are eligible for one of those 7 buckets. So yes, we'd be happy to look into that.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Rout. And of course, you have an expert here. If you have any questions, I'm sure Councilmember Rout wouldn't mind, helping to share the information that she has as well. Great, thank you all for that. The next item on the agenda is the Black History Month planning and preparations. Mr. Tarnovich or Councilmember Brown, you want to take that or you want me to? Okay.
Sure. Yeah, Mayor, I can kick it off with a general overview, and then if yourself or Councilmember Brown want to add some details, that could work. I know we've had 2 meetings so far. In our most recent meeting that we had, we are leaning more towards going towards a virtual program. Due to we have a significant amount of uncertainty with the public health at this point. So it's kind of tough to go through with planning something on a significant level for in-person, not knowing what's going to happen, especially with the state of emergency for the next 30 days. So it's issued by the governor, and we're really not sure what February is gonna bring for us. So I think at this point we have a few options that are have been discussed for some type of virtual sessions. I maybe let you, Mayor, or Councilor Brown dive into those details that we talked about in the committee, but that's kind of where we're leaning at this point, is to have a virtual event.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far into the details quite yet until we start putting out the promotional materials. But in a nutshell, we want to feature Black history through a different lens, and so look at the Black diaspora. So highlighting Black history from one of the Caribbean islands and one of the African countries, and really engaging our residents who are from those particular areas to pull them into the program to talk about their history, the culture, and really create an engaging program. We understand it's virtual, and virtual is tough. We learned that last year. It's hard to get people to tune in, and it's also hard to keep their attention. So in a nutshell, still have a little more fleshing out to do. That's just the 30,000 foot version, but I really look forward to working with the team to get some interesting marketing materials out there and really do something unique, completely different from some of the directions that we've taken the program to in the past. And do want to acknowledge we did get a request for Black History Month to show the Dr. Thomas documentary. And so I did forward that email to the committee just to figure out how we can work that in, if it makes sense to the plan for next month. Councilmember Brown, you had something to add?
No, actually, no. You covered. I just did want to make mention about the Dr. Thomas thing.
We were vibing. Thank you. Keeping me on track. All right. The next item we have, or the next 3 items fall under new business. And the first item, I believe, is you, Mr. McGrory, the position classification plan update.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I had sent the council a memo, and the purpose of this, in my experience, customarily the town administrator would submit with the budget, or at the time of final adoption of the budget, there'd be a package that would include the pay classification scale. The council, to its credit, after adapting to the COVID year, as it was debating the budget last spring, had deferred pay increases for staff, not knowing what the effect of COVID was going to be in early 2020 going into the 2021 budget. The council, so I'm led to believe, did not proactively push forward pay increases or a COLA, pending on some assessment of what the impact was going to be on the economy. So then fast forward to last spring, the council was debating the fiscal 22 budget, the current year's fiscal budget, and to its credit again, to reward the staff for their service during the COVID period and to adapt to inflationary pressures, et cetera, the council approved both a retroactive COLA for the fiscal year 2021 and a COLA moving forward for fiscal year 2022, as well as a step increases for fiscal year 2021. So having accomplished all that, there were multiple moving parts to the pay scale. And to the best of my knowledge, very first meeting that I had at the very end of June was the meeting at which the budget was adopted, when all of that was tied up. So the purpose of this agenda item is for me, given the mandate that I have to create a position classification plan and present it to the council, is to sort of start that process, or at least peg that process with the reality as we have it now. And that is the current pay scale that is in use, as well as the few new positions that have been added, but were not previously explicitly shown on the pay scale. So the scale that you have in front of you has 44 steps plus a base. So the base is step 0 and then 44 additional steps. It has both the hourly rate, which is a unit to the penny. The old rates, we had this interesting quirk where, because some salaries were defined by the annual salary, when you divided that to create an hourly rate divided by 2,080 hours per work year, you came up with fractions of cents for people's unit pay. And so this pushes the pay system the other direction, where you have a defined hourly rate in dollars and cents, and then that multiplies up to the annual rate. And then it shows all the positions currently staffed and to be recruited. So the new additions, the captain position in the last budget was discussed to be converted to a major. In both instances, that was the deputy chief of police, but that will now appear as a major, which is intended to help with recruiting for that position as a rank and to show its relative standing among peer institutions. The other position is the American Rescue Plan Grant Manager position, which, based on the position description that was approved, puts it in the same line or track as the sergeant position. So there wasn't a need to create a whole additional column for that. And then finally, the Director of Public Works position was approved and funded, but that did not appear explicitly on the pay scale. So the ask in the regular council meeting is for the council to approve this scale so that we can then move forward with building it out, and that becomes the basis. And you'll note in the upper left corner of both, there's the little number 1.000, and that is a placeholder where in the underlying spreadsheet, the council could apply a COLA and see the implications of that COLA spreading throughout the pay scale. So every pay position would be triggered. If you put in 1.0023, you would have a 2.3% COLA applied to the entire scale. So it makes it very easy to nest and modify this scale. Also, for certain positions, we have a good faith belief, as was done several years ago. Some of the public works positions were upgraded. They were believed to be, and I have every reason to believe this was true. The council certainly voted to approve it, but my predecessor had recommended that enhancements be made to the public works pay, and the council approved those. So that scale was shifted up relative to keep up with its peers in other jurisdictions, comparable size and geographically located. So that's a basic overview. Kind of having the council lock this scale in gives staff then the authority to build it out and come back with future recommendations for other enhancements or changes that may be made. In addition, some diversification of positions. If we decide as there's turnover, we may decide that a position should be tweaked in a certain way to add more technological components, or that we're unable to fill for recruiting purposes, we may need to enhance the job description or the pay scale. So if there are any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you for that overview, Mr. McCrory. Are there any questions from the council members? And Mr. McCrory, just I have the org charts, and I want to make sure I review that before the next meeting. Did you send that on Friday? I know there were a couple of additional documents, but I'm not seeing that this actual scale in my packet.
No, I sent that on Saturday, Mayor.
Ah, okay, all right. I'll pull that up and go through it during the break. Councilmember Brown, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I saw the packet that you sent with the PDF file, but I don't know that I saw the one that you sent. Let me see, that you sent Saturday. Okay, with the attachments. Okay, so, oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I was just trying to find it. So you may have to, I don't know, resend to us again. Let's see, one other thing.
I'll
Yeah.
just hit forward on here to make sure it's at the top of everyone's inbox. I did find it from Saturday. Give me one moment. And
Good, I did the same, Mayor. I just hit send and it's
okay.
out of my
Yeah.
inbox. So
Okay.
People should have it now.
I do have it now at the top of
Okay.
it. Thank you. Mhm.
Perfect. So yeah, we'll try to allocate enough time for everyone to be able to review this before going into the next meeting. Did you have another question,
No,
Councilmember?
that's okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any questions from the rest of the team? Okay. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the If I Were Mayor contest, which is sponsored by the Maryland Mayors Association. It's one of their signature programs they do each year to educate elementary school students about local government. So it's really just a heads up that we've received the initial letter from MML letting us know the program is happening again. And this year's theme is celebrating the soul of Maryland. So I will be working to contact all of our fourth grade teachers and the principals for each of our elementary schools to make sure that they're on the lookout for the packets. From the conversation with MML last Wednesday, they're putting them in the mail and the teachers should receive the materials by the end of the month. The only complication is COVID, because if things don't improve and they're not back in the building, I'll have to be a little more creative with getting the information to the teachers. But I'm looking forward to talking with the students about the importance of local government and helping them to understand the critical need for them to be our future leaders on councils and in the Senate and anywhere else they so choose. Councilmember Brown, I see your hand, and then I see Councilmember Rout. All right, thank you. It was a carryover. Councilmember Rout.
Thank you, Mayor James. So I had an idea because I know that we have relationships with our 4th grade elementary students through the in-town elementary schools to include Rogers Heights. But we also have 4th graders that live in our community that don't attend these schools, but attend Prince George's County Public Schools. So I wanted to ask if you would be amenable just to record your conversation or something and then make it available on our social media outlets and invite if possible, the other 4th graders that live in our community to this, or would it only be open to the elementary schools that are involved in our community?
That's a great question. So typically it's for the schools in your municipality, so the way that it works is, let's say a student from Robert Goddard, it's a French immersion school. So if we have a student who attends their elementary school, that would fall under the Greenbelt umbrella. The mayor will be reaching out to them of Greenbelt, and if they win, they would be recognized by the Greenbelt Town Council and so forth. So I can also just circle back to MML to ask in situations like that, how they have dealt with it in the past, but just off the top of my head, I think it would fall within where the school is located, because what happens with us is, for example, with Bladensburg Elementary, if students are selected as winners from there, they may not live in Bladensburg, they may live in Riverdale or Cottage City or Edmonston, but they're still attending a Bladensburg school, and so they're recognized as such. But it's a great question. And then, happy to record, but just because I know those other local officials will be hitting those schools, I don't want to duplicate effort or feel like I'm infringing on their turf. But happy to just talk through that with MML to see how they've dealt with it in the past and how we can do something creative. So thank you for that idea. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
Mayor,
So,
can I just
yes,
wanted to,
Mr. McGrory.
I think Templeton, Rogers Heights, Bladensburg, and Port Towns, right? We got 4 schools within the corporate limits?
Correct. Well,
So,
and
yeah.
Templeton is kind of on the border. We just love them, so we count them, but technically they're right outside of the town. So if you're going true to form, it's Port Towns, Rogers Heights, and Bladensburg Elementary.
Okay.
Which right there, that's like 3,000 or 4,000 kids total, but not necessarily 4th graders, but I'm just saying it's a good pocket of school population. Great, thank you. So with that, I'm sorry, was there a comment?
You skipped over the new business.
Yes, so I see her on the line. I asked Marian Dombrowski to join us. Marian is an avid rower and part of the Washington Rowing School, which is under the umbrella of our awesome resident, Cindy, who lives right in Ward 1. And Marian is also an advocate for the river and is instrumental in the Friends of Quincy Run. And so for many years, we've partnered with them for a National Day of Service to honor Dr. King's legacy by helping our community look better, making it just feel as awesome as it should. And so Marian, if you're there, we want to turn it over to you to talk to us a little bit about the National Day of Service for this year and the activities that you have been working on.
Thanks a lot, Mayor James, and hello, everybody. I'm really glad that—
Marian, there you go. I was going to say, bring the camera down.
Yeah, I'm not very good at this one day.
We want to see your pretty face.
Okay. Yes, so as Mayor James said, for quite a few years, we have partnered on a day of service. This year, the Martin Luther King Day is Monday, the 17th. We're planning to do an event meeting at the Bladensburg Waterfront Park and specifically at Quincy Point. I don't know if all of you know where Quincy Run is, but it's one of the two major tributaries that of the Anacostia that go through Bladensburg. And I know Council Member Brown certainly knows it because she lives across the street and she's been to many, many of our events. So good to see you. So we'll be meeting at Quincy Point, as I said, and it sounds like we may have a really big group. So we may end up working at two sites. But tomorrow I'm meeting with Jorge from Anacostia Watershed Society. He's showing us where all their new plants are, their new trees are planted. Mayor James will remember this task from our day of service when it was 10 degrees and we all headed for the wetlands adjacent to the Anacostia and took care of the trees. Anacostia Watershed Society has planted about 400 trees near the waterfront park, and young trees do need to be taken care of. So it's a great thing to do in the winter. And we have a lot of volunteers that are experienced in doing this. We may also do some work at the footbridge, the 52nd Avenue footbridge, where we've done quite a few projects. We hope everybody will be able to come, and there's a job for everybody, even if you don't think you're really tough and woodsy. We have a place for everyone. The students from Gallaudet are going to be, some of the students will be joining us this year too. And we have several members that are ASL literate. I am not a Spanish speaker, and I'm trying to locate some of our members who are, so that we can include as much of the community as possible. Anyway, registration is from the Friends of Quincy Run website. I'm making a poster. Mayor James, I just sent you one version and I have another version if you want to take a look and see what you think. But there's quite a bit of information on our website already. I'll be populating that with more information, and I hope you all will be able to join us. Mayor James, have I forgotten anything that you can?
That was perfect, Mary, and thank you so much. And so I'll be shooting this out to the high schools and try to get more volunteers from there. And again, please go to the link. We'll make sure we include it in this week's e-blast. Mr. Charnovich, I did get your note, and that's why I was asking Ms. Dombrowski for a not a poster, sorry, what do you call it? A flyer that we could incorporate along with the link, encouraging people to sign up. If you can't be physically active and all you can do is supervise, we'll take you. Ms. Blunt, you can be the boss, tell us what to do. Sit there, point, pick that up, you know. Exactly. It's a team effort. So we appreciate, she's shaking her head.
We can always use, hey, no, I see you. You can take pictures. I'll bring you something really warm to wear.
There you go. But yeah. Thank you for keeping that at the forefront each year and really spearheading that for the beautification. As you know, everything in the tributaries ends up in the Anacostia River. So as much as we can clean and prevent from getting in there is important, but then also taking care of the trees along the waterfront park is also critically important. So we appreciate everything that you do to help the community.
Of course. Yeah, it's really great. I love Bladensburg. I'm just out. Anyway, I'll put our link in the chat box too.
Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Councilmember Brown, did you have a comment?
I would say she loves Bladensburg. Thank her so very much. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us, Ms. Dombrowski. Looking at the agenda, make sure I didn't miss anything. So it looks like we've come to the end. Is there a motion to adjourn tonight's work session?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Rout. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Brown. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, let it be known by the saying of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you so much, everyone. We're adjourned.
Thanks, okay.